From various sources and persons who are said to be the close relatives of Dost Muhammad Baloch, it is learnt that Mrs. Jane Garnand, granddaughter of Dost Muhammad Brohi, came to Pakistan, Karachi in the year 1993. Her basic mission and aim for visiting Karachi was to find out the family roots of her grandfather Dost Muhammad and grave of her slain grandmother, Annie, wife of Dost Muhammad Brohi, who was assassinated in Sharifi Garden in Lyari, Karachi on 8 August, 1910. She was referred by the then Commissioner of Karachi to meet with Mr. Sattar Gabel, former minister during Zulfikar Ali Bhutto's tenure. She stayed in Karachi for about 10 days. During that period, she met with the family of Dost Muhammad in Jirak and visited several related places to find out the grave of her grandmother, which after thorough search, she learned that it was at a former graveyard near British Embassy in Clifton, Karachi. Based on this experience, Mrs. Jane Garnand has written a book by the title of Story of My Grandfather from Lal Bakar to Australia. Mrs. Jane's husband was a diplomat of Australia, and was also stationed at China, but he is now a retired person. Jane Garnand and her family are now living in a city 400 miles away from Sydney, and she also remained in contact with Mr. Gabel. The tragic story commenced like this: Australia, being a partly desert country, had a need for camels for travel and trade up to the end of 19th century. Camels from Asian regions, especially from Balochistan and Afghanistan, were very popular in Australia. At that time, steamships were used for traveling abroad, and it took several months to reach the destination. Ships commonly employed business routes, plying from India through Burma, Assam, Sri Lanka and then Australia. It was the time when British had just discovered Australia. Our central character, Dost Muhammad Brohi, born in 1870, was an emir, lord, of his tribe and very much interested in exporting camels to Australia. He first visited Australia and landed at Albany in 1893 to assess the trading opportunities of camels in Australia from British India. After analyzing the need of trading, Dost Muhammad with his elder brother, Jirak, born in 1853, left for Australia in the year 1894 with 25 camels for selling. Few Afghanis were also with them with their camels for business. After trading and selling camels, Jirak left for Karachi and thereafter several times visited Australia for business, while Dost Muhammad, 26, remained in Australia and got married with a British origin girl, Annie, who had been working in a bakery near his residence in 1896. Life was going happily. Dost Muhammad and Annie had 6 children, 3 boys and 3 girls, namely Mustafa, Hagu, nicknamed Bill, Ilyas, Fatima, Lillian, Janet. Annie had 2 brothers, namely Harry and Bill, but Dost didn't like them at all because they were all the time drunk, since according to the tradition of Australian, drinking and visiting of friends is common, and Dost Muhammad, being a Baloch and Muslim, did not like these customs, and by nature Dost Muhammad was also a noble and honest person, famous for keeping deposits of people in Lyari. The reasons mentioned above, he had serious disputes with his brothers-in-law, and it was also rumored that Dost Muhammad had also broken the arm of one of his brother-in-law, Bill, in a quarrel. Afghan friends of Dost Muhammad were also aware of the disputes. These disputes grew deeper, and on the night of April 7, 1909, Bill and Harry killed Dost Muhammad by crushing his skull, using a heavy piece of timber. Bill was the prime suspect. Dost Muhammad died at the spot. Bill and Harry were charged for murder in May 1909. They were committed for trial, and record shows that a correspondence for several years had taken place between the then Prime Minister of Australia and Premier Provincial Minister of British India when the news broke out in newspapers. This news came to Karachi through Afghan friends, and the brothers of Dost Muhammad were shocked. Jirak with his 2 sons, namely Gul Muhammad and Qadir Bucks, left for Australia to find out the cause of the murder of his brother and also to see if there was any property left by Dost Muhammad in Australia, because Jirak was the executor of Dost Muhammad's will. As per will of the Dost Muhammad, the property left by him was to be divided between Annie and her children when they reached the age of maturity. Jirak pressurized and induced Annie to move to Karachi, British India, now Pakistan, along with her 6 children, where they could be given good English education and proper care. Jirak bought one-way ships tickets for Australia to Karachi for them, but Annie had a suspicion that Jirak will not keep his promise. Annie with her children left for Karachi, and 2 sons of Jirak, namely Gul Muhammad and Qadir Bucks, were with Annie in the ship. Annie reached Karachi and stayed at Lal Bakar and New Kumbarwara, Lyari, with the relatives of Dost Muhammad. They were treated well because Dost Muhammad was a well-off person. A period of about 1 year passed peacefully and happily. In Australia, Chirac finally reached to the conclusion that Bill and Harry, Annie's brothers, were involved in the murder of his brother. He then wrote a letter to his sons in Karachi, namely, Gul Muhammad, Qadir Bucks, and Rosie, mentioning that Annie was responsible for conspiring with the murderers of their uncle, Dost Muhammad, saying such stupid words in Balochi in his letter Spathan Goka Bokoshi, meaning kill the white cow. Somehow, Annie became aware of the threat to her life and she went to British authority, seeking help, whereafter she was taken along with her children to Malir Sharifi. At a mile's distance there was a camp of British security officers. From the evidence, a group of attackers including sons of Chirac, Gul Muhammad, Qadir Bucks and Rosie, equipped with knives, daggers and axes attacked the house at night of August 8, 1910, where Annie was staying with her 6 children. Annie with her 2 children were on the same bed while her eldest son, Mustafa, was sleeping outside in veranda. It is believed that they entered through the window of bathroom, supposedly opened by Mustafa, the eldest son of Dost Muhammad and Annie. The attackers went into the house and attacked Annie with knives and axes. Some of her fingers were cut off, and she resisted but eventually was knifed to death. Some of her children were also wounded and they were taken to the then Lady Dufferin Hospital for treatment. According to findings, a murder attempt was also made earlier, but there was a dog guarding the house and it had failed. Zorac's 3 sons, namely, Gul Muhammad, Qadir Bucks and Rosie were arrested by the British India Police and charged with murder. Rosie and Qadir Bucks were released due to non-availability of solid evidence, but Gul Muhammad, being the prime suspect, remained in jail for about 1 more year. Zorac was also wanted by the police but he was in Australia. Finally 5 children were sent to Australia, with a British officer, except eldest son, Mustafa, aged about 12, as it was believed that he was involved with the attackers, by making their way clear. But later investigation proved it wrong and Mustafa, because of fear, remained in Karachi, married and died here. He also paid a visit to Australia when he was young. From the sources found, it is disclosed that Dost Muhammad and Annie had 6 children, 3 boys and 3 girls, namely Mustafa, Hagu, nicknamed Bill, Ilyas, Fatima, Lillian, Janet. Mustafa and Lillian had no children, while Hagu/Bill had children. Rosie's son of Zorac, son and many other relatives are still living in Kumbarwara, Lyari, Karachi. Muhammad Brohi, born in 1870 in Lal Bakar, Raipur. Chirac, elder brother of Dost Muhammad, born in 1853 in Lal Bakar. Dost Muhammad's first visit to Australia in 1893, when he was 23, Dost Muhammad's second visit to Australia in 1894, when he was 24, Dost Muhammad and Annie was married in 1896, when he was 26, period of marriage about 13 and a half years. Dost Muhammad was murdered in Australia in July 4, 1909, when he was 39, Annie was murdered in Malir, Karachi in August 8, 1910. Annie spent time in Karachi till her assassination about 1 year and 4 months. Number of children of Dost and Annie were 6, 3 boys and 3 girls. Name of the children: 1 Mustafa, boy, he lived, married and died in Karachi. He had no children. 2, Hagu or Bill, boy. 3, Ilyas, boy. 4, Fatima, girl. 5, Lillian, girl, had no children. 6, Janet. Both Dost Muhammad and Annie were murdered while sleeping. Name of brothers of Annie who involved in murder of Dost Muhammad: 1, Harry. 2, Bill. Harry and Bill charged for murder of Dost Muhammad in May 1909. Jane Garnand, granddaughter of Dost Muhammad, visited Karachi in 1993, stayed for about 10 days.